Hello and welcome to the Fishing Guide Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Wiegmann. I tell you what, we have two great crappie anglers here, and I'm pretty excited because, John, this is the first time I met you.
Yeah.
But Kevin over here, I've written all kinds of articles about, and I finally got to meet him in person. And hopefully we'll get to have a little boat time with both of you. So I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about that. John, tell them who you are and a little bit about yourself.
John Harrison, Jonesboro, Louisiana. I live right there on a reservoir called Caney Creek. I also fish Darbone, Washita River, mainly crappie fish, LiveScope. And Kevin here, he's my tournament partner. We fish the ACTs and Crappie Masters.
All right. And Kevin, how about you?
Yes, sir. Kevin McCarley, North Alabama. I currently live in Ardmore, Alabama. Wheeler Lake is pretty much my home lake, but I fish Gunnersville, Pickwick, Wilson, all the Tennessee River lakes there in North Alabama.
So how does someone from Alabama and Louisiana, how do you guys end up teaming together? Because you're not fishing just...
You want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll answer. Last year, the Gunnersville tournament was the first time I'd actually met John. They came up to fish the ACT on Gunnersville. And
freezing cold,
15-degree weather. Actually, we were over putting rod holders on John's boat because the LiveScope bite was so tough.
Right.
And we actually got a second-place finish spider rigging.
Oh.
Which these days in these tournaments is almost unheard of. But
that is.
On Gunnersville, we know Gunnersville, I do, and I knew the grass. And that was the key to spider rigging, was spider rigging that grass. Because you could not see those fish in that grass with LiveScope. So you just had to trust and know that those fish were there in that area at that time.
Right.
And push those baits right over that grass, and those big blacks would come up out of that grass and just tear it up.
We knew they were in there, but I could not catch them. I could not catch those fish, especially LiveScope. And we were almost finna mount those rod holders in my boat to push jigs, but I found something, in a spot that more suited us. And we were fortunate. He got second, we got third in that tournament. But it was a good tournament.
We just hit it off from the first time we met, and knew we was going to be friends from then on, and it just worked out great.
Decided to partner up this year.
It takes a lot of unselfishness to do team fishing for crappie now. Used to, you had to have two people.
Right.
Nowadays, it's almost a one-man game.
One man in a net.
That's right. That's right.
Ever who's really pretty much on that day is the one that will catch the fish, and that varies. Tournament to tournament, day to day between us. But whoever's on the fish, the other one is working the back of the boat. I mean, if Kevin's hot today, I want him to catch every fish we can, vice versa. And we're culling the fish, and the other one isn't keeping the fish alive, netting the fish. But it's pretty much a 50-50 deal between us.
So tell us, Louisiana. What about Louisiana crappie fishing? So that's different. And we'll get to Kevin up there in God's country, Alabama.
Yeah, we fish all over the country, and there's good crappie in different places. But we're fortunate enough down in North Louisiana, South Arkansas, Mississippi, around in that area to have a lot of big crappie.
Right.
We're fortunate compared to some lakes up north that have a lot of crappie, but the size, they just don't quite have the size. But most of it down there, cypress trees, stumps, some open water fish, but grass. It's a lot like Gunnersville and some of these other lakes here in northern Alabama.
Right. And Kevin, how about those Alabama lakes?
Man, I don't know if I agree with him on them big fish or not. Now, I've caught some pretty big fish up there in North Alabama.
Oh yeah, there are. I'm talking about up north. Once you start getting further north,
you get north at Mason-Dixon, you definitely get smaller fish. Yeah. But North Alabama, I'm just fortunate to live in an area. I've always said this since I was a kid. You've got hunting, you've got fishing, and like you said, it's God's country to me. I mean, you've got enough of a large city in Huntsville. You drive 20, 30 minutes away from there, you've got Gunnersville, you've got Wheeler, you've got some of the best crappie fishing
that there is,
bass fishing that there is right there at home. And I love it.
Let's talk about gear. So, you guys, whose boat are you usually using in the tournament?
Using mine most of the time.
So, what do you have for a boat? How's it rigged up?
I'm running a 21 Ranger, 2021 Ranger.
fiberglass?
Oh yes, fiberglass. I'm running 2 LiveScopes up front. I actually got 3 graphs. I got 2 12 side by side, where I'll have an independent LiveScope and he'll have an independent LiveScope.
Right.
I have another trolling motor mounted on a cornfield crappie gear mount, cornfield fishing gear mount.
Right.
That has the foot cut off of the trolling motor, so he actually has control of a whole different LiveScope than mine.
Right.
And then we have another graph up there for for mapping, but.
That the double live scope really comes in handy. You know, anybody that live scopes know you can't live scope 2 people at one time.
That's right.
You know, it's always going to be one guy pitching at a time. But what that does, and we've already seen it in a couple of our tournaments, he's looking at fish over here on this side. Well, I might turn that live scope over 40 foot to the left of us. Whoa, there's a big fish
sitting on a stump over there. We might not would have seen. So
that we might not have seen with his just normal searching. Right. I'm searching too, so you know you get the benefit of both people searching for different fish. When you find the fish that you want, go get him.
So the controls that you're using for is it hand control, manual?
No, sir. I'm using a
cornfield
separate
crappie.
Well, I'm using a separate. We've got an old trolling motor. It's an old motor guide, I think. Like he said, he just cut the motor off of it, mounted live scope. So I've got my own foot pedal.
Right.
Now, what you tend to do with that foot pedal, you tend to try to hit the gas too much. You know, you think you're gonna move. But yeah, it's
basically a trolling motor mounted on my trolling motor.
Right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah. But I mean, that's for one. But the other transducers on what?
It's on my main trolling motor.
Oh, okay. It's on the
we
main
don't run them on poles.
Okay. You don't use the electric standalone servo electric one. No. Okay.
I don't think that's a good way to catch them if you're chasing roaming fish.
Right.
I think that works great if you're going to spot lock your boat and you're going to fish, say, a brush top that you're going to cast at.
Point that boat into the wind, hit your spot lock, put your top over here to your right, and you got your pole in your hand, and you can look at them and fish them. It works really good for that. But tournament fishing, I'd rather have it on the trolling motor.
Right.
You've got to chase fish. You've got to see a fish, go after that fish when you find the right one.
So talk about the gear that you use. As a team, so
B&M poles, of course.
What poles are you using though?
I love, and my favorite pole is the 12-foot brush cutter. It's the one I'm the most comfortable with. I've caught the most fish with it. I think John really likes either the stick, and he's now gone to the 14-foot diamond series.
Double diamond series.
Diamond series. It's a sweet rod. I like it. It's got a lot of backbone, a good tip. But if I'm somewhere where I'm gonna flip a fish.
Right.
Or in real thick timber, I like using the stick. It's a 13-foot pole. It's got a lot of backbone. It's not as flimsy on the end. It doesn't have that big B&M tip like B&M's famous for. It's more of a live scope and boat flipping rod, and I love it. But,
it's actually a rod that they brought back. They had in there. They had, and then they let it go. They weren't producing it probably because people weren't buying it because that was before. The electronics, and now all of a sudden they brought it back, and now they got the super sensitive one.
They finally talked me into putting one in my hand. Kent Driscoll and Bake Phillips was one taught me into trying it, and when I did, I would not put it down. Then the Diamond Series came along, and they kept on trying to get me to use the Diamond Series, and I had them in my boat for, I don't know, a month probably. And I never put one together, never really used one, and we went to Grenada. And I put one together and told Kevin, I said, I'm going to use this pole today, and caught a 3-pounder right off the bat on it, so that's all I'm using right now. I got them out there on the boat now. But
it's a cork handle, but it has a carbon graphite fiber reel seat that's inside there. It's a very sexy rod. When it comes to crappie fishing, it's probably
a nice rod.
It's not a white, it's not red, it's not orange, it's not purple, not green or pink. It's a
good looking rod. It's good, and it feels great in your hand, and you can hold it all day. He can testify
really
to that.
I run a bait caster on mine. A lot of people run a spinning reel. I run a bait caster on mine. But if we're going to cast those fish, say we're fishing some spooky fish or we're in the wind, we'll use a casting rod to cast to them. And I like the 75 series, the new 75 series from B&M. Kevin uses a sharpshooter.
I love the sharpshooter, the 6-foot sharpshooter. I can take and just flip it underhand and get it out there. You can even shoot it like you're shooting a dock.
Are you guys using braid?
I do not.
I
No?
use fluorocarbon.
Fluorocarbon? Oh.
Most all the time I'm using fluorocarbon.
I'm still a mono guy.
You're still a
using
mono guy.
I'm the old school.
So you're high vis,
Yeah,
and
I'm
he's
high
no
vis,
vis.
and he's
No, I'm running high vis.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
I'm running
High-vis
high vis fluorocarbon.
Who makes that?
K9.
Oh, okay. K9
makes an
yeah.
awesome high vis fluorocarbon line.
Yep.
And I stick with 10 pounds. Some people use 12. Some people go down, but I use 10 pound most
10.
all the time.
And what are you using for your braid?
Well, what I use is a 6 pound mono always.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
6 pound
The
mono.
only way I'll step up is I'll go to like a 10 on my brush cutter.
Right.
On my long pole, but on my casting rod, I've either got a 4 or 6.
4 or
Most
6.
of the time, I'm running a 6 pound mono.
I'll run the 6 pound high vis fluoro on my casting rod too, but I go down to a 6 pound on it.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about lures, because everyone loves lures.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
If there's one way to come home without any money in your pocket, you go to the tackle store and
That's
you
right.
bought lures.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
And actually, like jig heads and stuff like that, they've actually improved them. I mean, the jig heads have come leaps and bounds. People are like sickle hooks in their jig heads, and I mean they're redesigning their jigs so that they can get sickle hooks in them and that stuff. What are you guys using?
We both fish with iHole jigs. We're sponsored by iHole, but we believe in them. We'd fish with them if we wasn't sponsored by them.
Right.
It's actually just a jig head. It's got a hole all the way through where the eyes would be, and you can put your scent in. A lot of times we'll do that and use scent. But if on these jigs, a lot of times when you throw them in the water and you're watching them on LiveScope, the air will get caught where that eye socket is.
Right.
And as it bubbles as it's going down, you can see it better on LiveScope. So that's another reason we use them too.
There you go.
Yep.
Soft plastics.
I'm a slider guy.
Okay.
Always have
I
been.
love Crappie magnet.
All right.
I'm a slider guy. Charlie and Caroline and those guys have always been great to me. They were one of my first sponsors.
Oh.
And I couldn't ask for a better group of people to be associated with. The great thing about being with Slider and being in both is the fact that I used both of those products crappie fishing before I ever got into tournament fishing.
Right.
So it's great to be able to, just transition from what I've always used, go into the tournament world, and still use the same baits and still catch fish with the same products.
Right.
Couldn't be more proud to have both those people.
So let's get some tips on crappie fishing. We'll start with you, John. Give them a tip if they're going out and they don't have electronics. If they're going out and they're old school.
If you're old school fishing,
what's a
say
good
you're
tip?
fishing trees or you're fishing a brush pile.
Yeah.
I'd say start out above them. Start out above the fish. Start out above the brush pile. Fish around the edge of the brush pile. Don't just immediately drop that jig right in that brush pile.
Okay.
You'll have a lot of fish that just hang out on the outside or hold up on top of that brush, and you won't spook the whole bunch if you'll try to pick those off around the edges first. And if you're not getting bit, then go down a little deeper. Fish around that jig around that brush top, and then go down a little deeper until you figure out where they're at in the water column.
Okay. And Kevin, how about you? How about a tip from you for someone who has LiveScope but they can't figure it out? What's a good tip? I bought this
I
thing.
should have got that one.
Well, the best tip to me is just get out there and spend time on the water. You've got to learn to adjust your settings. You're going to look online. You're going to see different settings from Josh Jones, from Matthew Rogers, from different people.
Right.
But you've got to find your own settings that work for you. Generally, it's kind of the same for everybody, but LiveScope has just really, really changed the whole game.
Right. In tournament fishing.
In tournament fishing.
Well, it's made us realize some things we thought were true about crappie are true, and then we found some things out that aren't. And I've been asked, I've done some seminars on LiveScope, and the main thing everybody wants to ask is, what are your settings? What do you have yours set at?
Right.
And I tell them, we were doing one at the Grizzly Jig Show, and I told them, I said, you can walk downstairs and pick out 15 pros down there, and every one of them settings is going to be somewhat different.
Exactly right.
I think it's how your eye sees the screen. And the best tip I can tell somebody to learn how to use a LiveScope is spend time behind it.
Right.
Hours on the water looking at that screen. If you can see your jig and you can see the fish, you don't need to see anything else.
Right.
I mean, you can tweak it from there, but as long as you can see those two things, you can catch fish on the LiveScope.
The biggest thing you got to accomplish once you get that LiveScope that I figured out is you've got to figure out what a crappie looks like.
Exactly.
You know, there was a lot of mistakes made on my own part when I first got it of catching drum, catching catfish. You would never think a catfish is going to look like a crappie, but he can get there and lay there next to that tree, and he'll look just like a crappie.
Right.
So it's really just crappie identification is probably one of the toughest things for people that get LiveScope to learn to do, is to learn to identify that crappie.
The species.
Right.
And a crappie most of the time, and John will tell you this, when you see them out there and you're scanning, your junk fish are going to be moving and darting around.
Right.
90% of the time, that crappie's going to be sitting still.
Dead still in the water.
And that's the one you want to go after. And when you get close, he's going to try to take off and swim away. They'll have a tendency to go down into the mud. That's one thing I really learned about crappie.
Right.
They spend so much time in the mud.
Really?
A lot
Yes,
more
sir.
time than
Crappie
I
love mud.
ever thought.
You know, people like Ronnie Capps and Steve Coleman, way prior to LiveScope, they knew this. They figured it out.
That's right.
And the first time I heard it, I was like, well, that's crazy. A crappie in the mud? Come on. But it is a proven fact. They
That's
were
where
right
they at.
many years ago. These crappie love mud.
Matter of fact, I was doing a little pre-fishing at Lake Washington last week.
Right.
And I was fishing 3 foot of water with my LiveScope, and I was actually spider rigging. Gonna try something different, see if we could do something different than the normal tournament thing. And I caught several nice tournament fish, but you never saw them on the screen until they came out of the mud.
Right.
They would just appear.
You took a picture of that one. Half the crappie from his head to his tail was covered in mud.
Oh,
He
really?
was
Half his
actually
body.
laying in that mud. And that's the hardest thing to see on LiveScope, is to see those fish that are in the mud.
When they're on the bottom.
That's right. That's it's tough to see them then.
So that's a pretty good tip on that. How about if you're bobber fishing?
Well,
If you're bobber fishing, do you use a bobber ever and
Yes.
pitch out and
Kevin does
catch
more
them?
than me.
Oh,
I'm
you
gonna let
do.
him
All
have
right.
that one.
I
Okay.
do, because Wheeler Lake is the
Okay.
flood control lake for that whole part of the Tennessee River. It's
Okay.
going to get all the water because it's got all the area to push that water. So we have a lot of shallow flats on Wheeler. And the way I grew up fishing was when the water was down to nothing but mud and stumps, we would walk out there with Dad
Right.
or Granny. You know, my grandmother, big crappie fisherman, big influence on me, you know.
Right.
And we would go out there and mark those stumps with a piece of pipe or something.
Right.
Then when the water comes up,
Oh, nice.
that's the way you would go catch them back then. You know, little John boat, you just throw your bobber past that stake, bring that minnow right back to it and let it sit. Because there was going to be a fish on that stump that time of year. So that's kind of how I grew up, that, and also drifting as many cane poles as you could stick under each leg as a kid, you know. And you just drift over a stump flat. There's a lot of stump flats on Wheeler, and that's, that's what I grew up fishing, a lot of shallow water fishing, and that's when I'll use a bobber now, even with LiveScope. You know, you've got a stake bed and 5 foot of water. You know, you can power pole down, you can spot lock, whatever, once you locate where it's at. And it's really simple to throw that bobber, especially with kids or people that aren't as experienced. You can set that depth you want on that bobber, throw it out there, let it set, and those fish will get it.
What kind of bobbers do you like to use?
What
style?
I like a slip cork style.
A slip cork.
I like a slip cork, and I'm a big fan just because, you know, Wheeler, people love to push corks. I don't do it, but they make those corks, just the regular foam corks with the slit in them.
Yep.
I love those because you can take them on and off. You never really clip your line with them.
Right.
It doesn't really get abrasion on your line.
Makes a cork
That's
that
right.
same way that you
One
can
of
just
those
slip right
with
on
a
your line
slip.
and peg.
That's right.
And if you want to take it right back off, just pull it out, and your line comes right out the side of the cork. So that's really handy.
All right. Well, that takes us to Tackle Time. Tackle Time is sponsored by PICO Lures. PICO Lures has a complete line of hard and soft baits, so you can check them out at picolures.com. And they do have different lures for crappie, walleye, stripers, whites, bass, everything that swims, game fish that you can eat, they got it. So you can check them out there at picolures.com. And that takes us up to, if they wanted to find out more about you, John, where would they go?
Facebook, John Harrison, on on Facebook, Instagram, John Harrison Fishing, YouTube, John Harrison Fishing.
And this is John Harrison from Louisiana.
There's
So we
John
need to
Harrison
make sure we
Mississippi.
get that in.
That is a
Mississippi.
really good crappie fisherman, and people
should've-
confuse us all the time. But no, and
We should have started with that, like at the start of the show, but we got to it.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
Louisiana's version, he's Mississippi's
right.
version.
That's right. He loves mud bugs.
Oh yeah.
So that's a good one. And Kevin, if they wanted to find out more about you, where would they go? Social media?
Be Facebook, be Kevin
Okay.
McCarley. I don't have a separate fishing. It's just me, Kevin McCarley.
All right.
On Instagram, it's opposite. It's McCarley Kevin.
All right.
I'm also on YouTube, TikTok, and also if you
TikTok.
want to check out some of my fishing, you can go to the Brush Pile Fishing app.
Okay.
I've done two shows with Russ,
right.
and I've also actually already shot a third show.
Okay.
That just hasn't aired. It's supposed to be airing this season. So,
Okay.
you can go to Brush Pile Fishing, check out some of the fishing that me and Russ did. We always have a good time out there.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well,
Yes, sir.
like I always like to end the show, make sure you keep your hook sharp and your lures in the water.
That's right.